And in 3, 2, 1.
You are now listening to the Lapsed Graps podcast.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode 4 of Lapsed Graps, a podcast where I, Sam, a person who watches pro wrestling, sit down with my friend
Jam, who doesn't?
and we discuss the wacky week that was in professional wrestling. Now, before we get too far into it, we do want to send our condolences. Road Warrior Animal, it was announced, passed away on Tuesday at 60 years old. Obviously, a member of the Legion of Doom, one of the most popular WWE tag teams of all time. More recently, I know he was the head of talent relations for several years with WWE. He was an on-screen general manager and was just a really well-liked backstage guy.
If you can't say that he's one half of the best tag team ever, you can say that he's one half of the most influential tag teams ever. And without him giving that footprint, a lot of tag teams today will look different. Tag team wrestling in general will look different. And as just a overall huge fan of tag team wrestling, I give my condolences to friends and family. This is just big loss.
Absolutely. You could easily argue that without Legion of Doom kind of running roughshod over the division in the 80s and early 90s, there would be no Viking Raiders. There would be no Ascension, no DIY to an extent. Like all of these incredible teams that we love so much that are in WWE or were in WWE that were based on these larger than life characters can draw inspiration directly from Legion of Doom. So his death and his loss is going to be felt by the wrestling community at large for a long time to come. Okay, so jumping into SmackDown, the show opened with the Dirt Sheet, which is Miz and Morrison's talk show. They're sitting in the ring and they're discussing how they had Mandy moved to Raw. They start going into some really weird directions with having Mandy moved to Raw, saying, obviously they're continuing on with the Otis storyline of like, well, he needs to focus and da 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 da. And then Morrison makes a comment that, it seems like Mandy's already gotten distracted at Raw, and Miz makes some weird offhand comment about how he knows a lot of guys at Raw want to smell her flower, which was really, really, yeah, it was gross. It was weird and it was gross. Around the time that Miz makes the comment about people smelling Mandy's flower, we have Otis come down to the ring and he just starts laying into these guys. He immediately throws Morrison out of the ring, but then up pops Tucker, who puts him back in the ring. So Tucker's kind of on the outside, just running interference, keeping those guys in the ring while Otis just takes out his frustration. The spot ends when Miz, who is trying to claw his way out of the ring and up under the ropes so that he can escape, gets grabbed around the waist by Otis and has his tights pulled completely off. So Miz is just standing there in like a pair of Hanes tidy whities, like on the entrance ramp, screaming at Otis and Tucker. And I don't know, it's weird. I love Otis. I love Heavy Machinery. I really enjoy the Miz's work. I'm not digging this like comedy feud. It's not something that I'm enjoying right now.
Yeah, sounds like it's a bit much to say the least. Like in execution, it just sounds really bad for a plethora of reasons. But even without seeing the execution, I'm just kind of confused as far as like where this could go. Like this is a tag team trying to get a Money in the Break briefcase, and you can't really see them as a threat because they're doing this stupid comedy stuff. It's like it's hard for me to see the end game here, or what's the point of it all.
Yeah, so speaking of the Money in the Bank briefcase, we're immediately shown those two backstage after they escape the ring, and Miz gets a phone call. He goes and fishes it out of his pants that he's holding, answers the phone and says, "Is that enough? Did you get all you need?" you hear someone talking on the other end of the line. You can't really make out what he says, what they're saying, or if it's even a man. He smiles real big and he says, "Okay, great." Hangs up. Morrison starts yelling at Charlie, who's back there trying to get a comment, that, they had a plan, they've got a plan, and they're great, they're geniuses, it's all great, and then they walk away. So that's the end of that. I guess they're continuing with this storyline that, like, Otis is misusing the Money in the Bank contract or not using it properly, or he's a dangerous person, and they're trying to find a way to legally separate him from his Money in the Bank contract. It continues on with the point you made earlier that it's comedy stuff that's not landing. It feels like they needed something to give these guys to do, and they couldn't justify just leaving them in catering, so they put them here and gave them this feud. And bless those guys, they're doing the best they can with it. It's not working.
Yeah, and when you add this whole new legality thing to it, it's hard for me to imagine fans enjoying it because I can't think of an instance where like legal lawyer stuff being introduced into wrestling ever made it interesting. Like there was some legal stuff I think with John Cena CM Punk storyline. A lot of people said that was a downpour of that storyline. Or Kevin Owens back when he was Kevin Steen and Ring of Honor when he was trying to sue Ring of Honor on screen to get his job back, and everybody said that was boring because fans don't really care about this legal verbiage jargon. They just want to see people wrestle.
Continuing on with SmackDown, we had the Lucha House Party, which has continued to tease the breakup that we kind of saw on Instagram last week from Lince Dorado posting that picture with his face, with his back to the camera and the mask on his fist, saying goodbye. We had Grand Metalik in a one-on-one match with Cesaro after Cesaro and Shinsuke's loss to the team last week. Lince Dorado and Kalisto are both on the outside giving Grand Metalik conflicting advice, conflicting information, trying to call the match for him. And it ends up with Grand Metalik being so confused and distracted that he loses the match. He gets pinned, which kind of has Lince and Kalisto going at each other's throats. So they're teasing that they're going to end up breaking up at some point, and either Lince is going to go down to NXT and join up with Legado del Fantasma, or he's going to be doing his own thing as an unmasked wrestler. I'm not really sure where they're going with the story right now, but I love those three guys. They're all really talented, and I hope that they're given like the time and the stage to really tell a compelling story.
Yeah, same here. And I do like the idea of them if they do just all split off and do their own thing. I like the idea of three masked guys who aren't necessarily connected, but they're all just doing their own thing. Like WWE likes to pair people together, pair luchadors together, just because they have a mask. Like when they paired Rey Mysterio and Sin Cara together, they didn't have anything in common except the fact that they both wore masks. If you got all of these masked luchadors going around just doing their own thing, not necessarily in each other's storylines or each other's paths, just doing their own thing, it just kind of like diversifies the roster. I think that's kind of cool if they have a plan for each of these wrestlers and there's actually like a push in store for them.
Yeah, I agree. If they just are breaking them up to break them up and to do something different, it's a bit of a waste in my opinion.
Mhm.
But hopefully that's not what they're going to do, and we'll actually get some story with these three guys. Okay, so Sasha returned this week to deliver an emotional promo. She's in the Performance Center, so it's done via video link, so she's not actually in the Thunderdome while she's doing this. She states that Bayley would be nothing without her, and that Bayley rode Sasha's coattails all the way from NXT to the top of the women's division. It's interrupted by Bayley, who is also in the PC, attacking her before being separated by PC staff. So she's in the video link, she's giving this promo, and then we just see Bayley kind of come in out of nowhere on the right end side of the screen and just take her down. It cuts to a wide shot, and then the PC staff are like very quickly pulling her apart. There's not a whole lot of context it really seems like they're trying to milk this as much as possible. There's not the typical, like, oh, they're smacking each other for 45 seconds to a minute before anyone gets in there. It's like they're on top of each other, immediately pulled apart.
All right, that sounds like they went about it the right way. I think I think milking it until we actually get the proper match when Sasha's not injured and off screen. That will, like we talked about this a couple episodes ago. Like the more you milk this, the more people want to see it, and it makes that match feel all the more special, I think.
So continuing on with the main event of SmackDown, we had a Samoan street fight with Jey Uso and Roman Reigns on one side, and then we had King Corbin and Sheamus, who are, for the time being temporarily aligned on the other side. And Roman Reigns was actually in the ring before the bell rang. It's a miracle. The rest of the match doesn't matter. The way it ended doesn't matter. He was in the ring before the bell rang. The match was legitimate. It's incredible. I'm so happy. They're finally doing something real with this guy.
Just out curious, why are Baron Corbin and Sheamus together?
Because they think they should be the Universal Champion.
Okay, that's gonna be hard when they find out only one guy can be Universal Champion. But okay, I'll buy it.
Well, I think it's more the enemy of my enemy is my friend is the thing they're trying to go for. But yeah, it's basically King Corbin's thing is, well, I'm the king of, Friday Night SmackDown. I should be the top champion. And Sheamus's whole thing is I've been here forever, and the Universal title's the one title I haven't held in WWE, so I should be the Universal Champion. And it's not good. They're
Okay.
white guys that they needed to beat up on some Samoan guys before the Samoan guys could beat up on each other. Is basically how that boils down.
Okay.
Yeah. A dejected okay is the way the rest of the world feels about this feud as well. No worries. So jumping over to Monday Night Raw, we had Retribution starting the night in the ring, and they've got a bit of a different look. So no more black baklava ski masks. You've got Mia Yim, Dominic Dijakovic, and Mercedes Martinez all in the ring. Mia's got this leather, Hannibal Lecter looking thing on. That doesn't fit well. Mercedes is all made out of steel bars, and then Dominic's just got a Bane mask, just a Bane mask. Uh, it was weird. It was definitely weird, and I'll get into why it was weird even more here in just a second. So Mia Yim's actually allowed to talk. It's not just Dominic talking this time, but as she's talking, it's like they never did a screen test with her mask. They never saw how her mask was going to work if she wasn't just sitting there silently wrestling. So as she's talking, the mask is shifting and slipping down her face. So she's constantly pulling the mask back up to make sure it's in the right position so that she can continue her promo. The promo doesn't matter. It doesn't. I would tell you what they said in the promo. I watched it twice. I still don't know. It's a lot of, we're here to mess things up and blah, da, 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 da. And then it comes out that they've now got contracts, so there's no legal repercussions for what they do on Monday Night Raw, but there's not been any legal repercussions beforehand, and their whole thing is that they hate the people that are taking money from the corrupt corporation. But that doesn't matter. They've all got new names. So Mace, T-Bar, and Slapjack are the three names that we know so far. Dio Madden, formerly on Raw commentary for all of 6 minutes, is now known as Mace. Dominic Dijakovic is T-Bar, and Shane Thorne is Slapjack. We don't know Mia Yim or Mercedes Martinez new names. These are the only names we have. They are ridiculous. People all agree that they're ridiculous. And there are many, many reports coming out of the WWE bubble, mostly from Fightful.com, where a lot of wrestlers that are active duty right now are commiserating with how hard it's going to be for these guys to make this gimmick not suck.
So I've got a lot to say on that.
Yeah, I figured you would.
First off, with these code names, did they actually come out and say I'm Mia Yim, I'm Mercedes Martinez, or
No.
Okay?
Their actual names are never mentioned. The female members of Retribution are never addressed by name. You had Dominic Dijakovic announcing himself as T-Bar, and then like kind of doing the whole chest slap thing on the other two guys and saying, and this is Mace and this is Slapjack, which Twitter had a lot of fun telling everyone what Slapjack is according to Urban Dictionary. That was a really funny tweet that I saw from Tiger Driver 9X, was like as soon as that segment went off air, they just like pulled up their phone, looked it up on Urban Dictionary, screenshotted it, and sent it on its way. And it's pretty incredible. You would think that if you're coming up with like a weird like code name, you would just throw it in Urban Dictionary, just see what it comes up, if anything. But no, they didn't, and we are blessed because of it.
Okay, I did not see the promo or much of the hoopla Twitter was making. I did come across a picture of all five people
Mm.
in the ring. I'm going to unpack this picture for a second. First off, so like the big reason why I asked if they actually reveal themselves is because I can tell just from the picture exactly who each of these wrestlers are just by looking at like you would think they would actually have something to like camouflage who they are. Like Mia Yim, dead center, only WWE superstar with long blue hair. Obviously, that's her.
And
Mercedes
like a
Martinez,
thin strip of leather over the like over her nose. That's it.
the
It's
thinnest strip of
ridiculous.
leather over her nose. Then you got Mercedes Martinez, who just has very, I guess, striking eyes. She's a very scary lady. I'm going to remember those eyes. So I definitely see the eyes, and that's Mercedes Martinez. Then big giant Dio Man in the background, lurking dreadlocks. It wasn't even like 6 months ago, was it, when he got thrashed by Brock Lesnar? Like, I'm gonna remember what he looks like.
Honestly, I think it might have been just about 6 months ago because it was right before the pandemic. Because he comes to the defense of the King. Uh, Lesnar F5s him through the table, and he's never heard from, seen of, or mentioned by Raw commentary again. So you would think he gets up in the ring, he's got his whole Retribution garb on. Tom Phillips or one of those guys would be like, oh, hey, I know that guy. Weird. What's he doing here? Odd. Strange. Confusing. But no, they're just like, oh, yeah, we don't know him. He's here now. Whatever. Ugh.
Yeah, it's the fact that he was an on-screen character that bothers me so much. Like, it wasn't that long ago we've seen him. We saw this big hulking black guy with dreads. Now there's a big hulking black guy with dreads and a mask. It's not gonna be hard to put two and two together for long-time viewers. Then you've got another guy who I'm guessing is Dominic Dijakovic. It threw me off because I saw red hair and he was looking kind of bald. Maybe Dominic Dijakovic just has like a balding on the side of his head and it threw me off. But anyway, I he looked like you said, he looks like Bane. Like it's
Mhm.
it's such goofy imagery. Then the other guy, like you said, that was Shane Thorne. I didn't immediately peg that as Shane Thorne, so bravo to them for at least concealing his identity. But
But
they
do you
made
not
him
peg that for being Shane Thorne because Shane Thorne has, a very distinctive look and they hit it, or because Shane Thorne hasn't been seen on NXT since like 2019?
both. Let's go with both.
Fair
Let's go with
enough.
both.
Fair enough.
And but even with me not recognizing him, he looks like Jason Voorhees, so that also looks like goofy imagery.
Hmm.
And collectively, all these guys in the ring just look like. Have you ever seen Power Rangers?
Yeah.
Have you seen the Psycho Rangers where they got like the red, blue, like the really goofy, like goblin faces?
I have not.
Google that. Actually, you don't even have to Google that because you've seen it on Monday Night Raw. The Psycho Rangers are now Retribution. It looks so. It's the goofiest thing in the world, and it's like you said. If there's a big hoopla backstage from people in WWE bubble saying it's gonna be hard for them to climb up, it's has there ever been someone who had to climb up from doing something this bad? Because you had Triple H coming back from Hunter Hearst Helmsley, The Rock came back from Rocky Maivia. I don't think anybody has been forced to come back from something this bad before, so it's gonna be a tough climb.
Dolph Ziggler did debut as part of the Spirit Squad.
I love Spirit Squad. We're not gonna have a Spirit Squad slander.
We absolutely are going to have Spirit Squad slander. That was horrible.
That was
It
great. So I
was.
will defend Spirit Squad so that we could have an
Oh
episode
no.
me defending
Oh
Spirit
no.
Squad.
Oh no. I might need to find a new co-host if you think Spirit Squad was a good gimmick. Oh no. Well, continuing on with the slog that was Raw, we had Rollins come down to the ring, and he's going to be facing Dominic again, because of course he is. But before he faces Dominic in a match, he has something important to say. So he gets the whole Mysterio clan around the ring, and he says that he had a DNA test run on Dominic, and Dominic is not Ray's son. So Ray immediately reacts like, yeah, no, we've done this before. I had a whole ladder match about it. Like, it's not, no, like, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. So Seth apologizes, says, you're right. I misread it. I'm so sorry. It's not Dominic that's not Ray's son. It's his daughter, Aaliyah, who has been an on-screen character for like 3 weeks. And it was so stupid. It was so bad. It was so bad and it was so stupid. Dominic and Ray immediately start screaming, trying to like get a hold of Rollins. Aaliyah freaks out and starts yelling at Ray and her mother, whose name I don't know, and then runs to the back. And that was that entire segment.
Okay, now there's a lot to unpack there. I guess maybe with Dominic being an active wrestler, they had to bring up the Eddie Guerrero storyline. I guess because
Did
it's
they
so
though? Did they?
it's so infamous. Like even if I feel like even if you don't know wrestling, you know that two guys fought for custody of a child at one point, and Dominic grew up to be that child, or was that child until he grew up.
Fair enough. It
But
was just,
like,
ugh.
but like, even if you didn't have to revisit, why is his sister now a focal point as an illegitimate child? Is she supposed to be Eddie's kid too, or is it just an illegitimate child?
They didn't get into whose kid it was. They just said it wasn't Ray's kid. And then backstage after this, there's a part where Murphy, who is still with Seth, they didn't end up breaking up after all, approaches Aaliyah because Aaliyah like took a moment and like comforted Murphy after he got beat down last week. And they like have a moment and they're kind of talking back and forth. So the way it seems right now is that they're trying to draw Aaliyah over into like becoming a disciple of Seth Rollins, and that'll lead to something there. But I've heard for years that Dominic was training to be a wrestler. I've never heard that Aaliyah was training to be a wrestler. I've never heard that Aaliyah had any interest in being a wrestler, has had any interest in professional wrestling at all as a whole. So I don't know why they're doing this.
Yeah, that was going to be like my next question. Like make her a disciple to do what? It's like you said, I haven't heard anything about her wanting to be involved in wrestling or be a wrestler. I didn't even know that Dominic had a sister until you were telling me about these segments.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is she gonna be a valet just for the storyline? When the storyline's over, she's just gonna be there. It's I, it's almost a polar opposite of the whole Morris and Miz angle, where with that I couldn't see the end game. With this, I kind of see the end game, but I can't see it going anywhere that anyone's gonna like or anyone's gonna care about. But moving on from that, you said Buddy Murphy is still with Seth Rollins, right?
Yes.
So basically, they made Buddy Murphy a cuck, basically, in
Yeah,
that like
100%.
yeah. So that's even goes back to the retribution thing. This is something that he's gonna have to climb up from because the, if they did the whole breakup angle and he came back, that so even if they do split, it's like I can't take it seriously now. And it's
Mhm.
hard for me to even take him seriously with this. I don't know. It just all sounds dumb.
Oh, absolutely. It's ridiculous and horrible. And it's amazing to me how quickly Buddy Murphy went from like one of the most over smaller guys on the roster, winning the cruiserweight title in Australia in front of his home crowd, to just being another guy that when I see him on my screen, I groan internally because I don't know what stupid crap they're going to make him do this week and I don't want to watch it.
Hmm.
It's just because I mean, he won that cruiserweight title in Australia 2 years ago. So it's not like he did that, went away, and came back. Like, he's been here the entire time. They gave him the title. He lost the title, came to Raw, and has done nothing.
Yeah,
Absolutely nothing. It's ridiculous.
yeah, I don't. It's weird, and like you say, he's a lower guy, but like the beauty of him is that he's one of the smaller guys, but he's jacked. So from like a viewer's perspective, he doesn't look like a low guy. If you put him next to a big guy, he might look low, but he's got the beauty of moving and being the size of a low guy without actually looking like a small, puny guy. So there's like a believability and I guess legitimacy to him. It's like when he was wrestling Roman Reigns a couple years ago. Like he stood tall, and you didn't think it was Roman Reigns versus a low guy. You thought Roman Reigns versus an equally jacked guy, and if they kept that dynamic, he could have been a good mid card guy. But wherever he came to Raw, wherever they're doing with him now, it's just they're just sinking him into the dirt. It seems like forever since he had that cruiserweight championship, and now might as well say he's in the running for the Cuck championship now. It's I feel for the guy.
Yeah, no. And speaking of Raw bringing people up just to misuse them, we go now to Raw Underground. Arturo Ruas loses to Dolph Ziggler in like 2 minutes. He got choked out by Dolph Ziggler of Spirit Squad fame, this legitimate badass guy that they brought in to give some credibility to their like shoot fight promotion, just gets destroyed. And then speaking of guys that they've built up just to immediately throw back down, Dabba-Kato lost to Braun Strowman in like a minute and a half.
Wait, Braun's on Raw now?
Yeah.
Was he in like a package deal with Mandy Rose, or is he just there?
No, he's just on Raw Underground because he wanted to beat on people. And he beat up on Dabba-Kato, who had a really interesting feud looking like it was going to get started with Kevin Owens 2 weeks ago. Then Kevin Owens never went back to Raw Underground, and then Dabba-Kato confronted Braun, and Braun decided he wanted to punch Dabba-Kato in the face, and then he beat Dabba-Kato. And there's, I hated Raw this week. It was so bad.
This sounds frustrating. It seems very up and down where they don't know what to do with the guys they want to push. Like it's like you've got Buddy Murphy, but you elevate him, but then do nothing with him when the time comes for it. Same with this Bobby KO. You put him in segments with Aleister Black and Kevin Owens. Now put him in a segment with Braun Strowman, and he just gets squashed, and it doesn't make a lick of sense.
He beat Aleister Black and Kevin Owens at the same time, clean, and just got rolled over by Braun Strowman in like a minute. I don't. I don't know, man. It's depressing at this point because there's another show this week that is not normally 3 hours. That was 3 hours, and it was a really good 3 hours. It was a 3 hours that didn't feel like 3 hours. It took me like 3 days to get through this week's episode of Raw because I couldn't do it. It was just, oh, it was so bad. It was so bad. But we're done with it now. That was the end of it. Dabba-Kato like ends the episode of Raw on his back, and that was the end of Raw. We don't have to talk about Raw anymore. Thank God. NXT. Candice LeRae wins a battle royal to earn a title shot against Io Shirai at TakeOver. This was a good battle royal. You had a lot of people that have been working like enhancement matches, kind of filling out spots. You had a couple of people that we haven't seen recently on NXT TV filling out some spots. You had a couple of really cool spots from Casey Catanzaro, who at one point gets kicked from the apron of the ring and then lands on her feet on top of the guardrail and holds onto the plexiglass and then like spins herself around still standing on the guardrail and jumps back over to the ring to get back in. A lot of really cool spots. Candice was my pick always to be the person who ends up challenging Io at a takeover. their chemistry is just insane, and Candice is really, really good in those like high intensity, high pressure spots. And I think it's going to be a really good match.
I think it's cool that they're going back to this well again because I like it when they do stuff where it's start off with one person being babyface, another person being a heel, then you revisit that down the line with flipped roles. I always think that's really cool. And from what I can vaguely remember of these two wrestling, they have amazing chemistry made for a great match, or maybe great matches. Again, my memory is terrible if they wrestled multiple times, but in any case, I think that this could be a show stealer if they get the time and willing to let it happen.
And the last thing from NXT before we move on, there was a short video package that teased the return of two former NXT stars at TakeOver. This was reiterated on their Twitter page, saying that two former stars, former champions, were going to be returning home to NXT. There's been no clarification if it is two individuals that were previously furloughed, or if it's two individuals that are active on the main roster right now. So a lot of people online are saying that the Ascension could be coming back to NXT because they haven't done anything on the indies since being let go, which a lot of people are kind of thinking is a little strange, considering you had Miro immediately popping up in AEW, you had Matt Cardona popping up in AEW, Brian Myers in Impact, Deonna Purrazzo in Impact, all these people popping up everywhere, and then the Ascension still claiming they're wrestlers, still claiming they're going to be active, not showing up anywhere. We also saw people online arguing that Samoa Joe could be coming back to NXT because he's been in a commentary role on Raw now for the better part of almost 6 months and hasn't been an active wrestler just because of his series of injuries that all kind of went down one after another. So I can see him just with his injury history wanting to not travel as much once the pandemic's over, not have to put that kind of stress on his body, and just rock up to Full Sail every week and film for a couple hours and then go home.
Who would you want those two people to be? Like, not thinking of like realism, what's the most realistic option? Just who would you personally want to see the two big reveals at TakeOver?
Bo Dallas and probably Samoa Joe. I want Bo Dallas back in NXT.
It's funny, I was going to say Bo Dallas.
Yeah, I want him back in NXT. He was so good in NXT, man. He was a legitimate, hard ass guy. And I get that it was a different era of NXT. It was before, Finn showed up, before the Undisputed Era showed up. But he was a bad man when he was in NXT. And I think he has the ability to be a bad man again in the same kind of way that Breeze came back and, reverted back to his NXT gimmick and just found new life. I really think Bo Dallas coming in is just kind of this no nonsense, I will knock your head off your shoulders with a smile on my face, kind of a bruiser dude, would be really, really cool to see. And I hope they allow him to do that.
Yes, he was so great in NXT. I feel like the main roster never really got what Bo Dallas was supposed to be. And that character always fit better in an NXT surrounding. So hopefully that's the guy that comes back. I have no idea who the second guy would be, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed for Bo Dallas.
Someone else that I heard, pop up on Twitter a lot because he's been pretty quiet since release was Aiden English. He's got his YouTube channel and his Twitch thing going on. He had a recent interview with Sean Ross Sapp where he said that he is by no means done wrestling. He's just doing other things right now. He hasn't ruled out an appearance on AEW to face off or team up with Miro, but he says that hanging himself on Miro's career isn't something that he wants to be known for the rest of his life. So it could be an interesting way to kind of bring him back in and let him sort of figure out what he's going to do. Ideally, they'd bring Simon Gotch back in as well, but he seems really happy with his position on the Indies in MLW and showing up at GCW for Josh Barnett's Bloodsport, which was announced earlier today, which is going to be incredible. He is such a talented guy and a really, really skilled shoot fighter, so watching him in Bloodsport is something that I'm looking forward to very, very much.
Did they announce a match for him at Bloodsport?
They did. So this is going to be incredible, and I am so fucking hype right now. Simon Grimm announced for Josh Barnett's Bloodsport facing Sin Cara 2.
Oh my, Sin Cara 2 is so good. Oh my, like
Yeah.
Hunico? Wait,
Yeah.
was he on the Indies now? Is he just Hunico now? Or is he
Yeah,
have
he's
another
back
character?
in AAA's Unico, but for the Western audience, it was announced as Sin Cara 2 brackets at Unico AAA close brackets. So that's gonna be like I've got goosebumps. That's gonna be insane.
Yeah, that event and that match especially is gonna be incredibly fun, incredibly amazing, and wherever A in English ends up, be it WWE at Takeover or just on the Indies or at Bloodsport, who knows? I'm excited for him. He was a guy who I always thought was very underused, if only as a character, as a mic guy. Very great promo. So, best of luck to him. I hope he ends up somewhere where he's used very well.
So over to AEW Dynamite. This was the other show that we had 3 hours of this week that didn't feel like 3 hours. On Tuesday night, about 1 a.m. on TNT, after the playoff game ended between the Celtics and Nuggets, I think.
Miami Heat.
Miami Heat. Okay,
What was
Celtics and
it?
Miami.
You said Tuesday?
Yeah, Tuesday night,
So
like
that
into Wednesday
was
morning.
so I think that was Denver versus Lakers.
Okay, so all four teams that I named were there, just facing other people. Whatever, it's fine. So about 1 a.m., we get a big flashy like thing on the screen saying, late night Dynamite, 1 hour special. It'll be incredible. There were 2 matches on it. It was okay. So back over on the 2-hour episode of AEW on Wednesday night, we had Brody Lee defending his TNT title against Orange Cassidy. Cassidy is still pretty laid back, but he's had a very specific demeanor change since his Mimosa match against Chris Jericho at All Out, where he's still laid back, still very like sloth-like, but he has that mean streak for him. You see a lot more of like his Green Ant persona from Chikara, where he was under the mask and just this guy that was flipping around the ring and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, come out a lot more. He's still very effortless, very easygoing, but he's pissed at this point, I guess is the best way to say it. So this was a much harder hitting match than I think anyone rather was really expecting it to be. Brody Lee actually had to show up and like focus in to put away Cassidy, which he does fairly easily. But it took him a lot longer to put Cassidy away than it did for him to quote unquote end the career of Cody Rhodes a couple of weeks back. So they're building Cassidy to be a legitimately strong and domineering person, first with his win over Jericho, now with his almost dominating performance against Brody Lee. They're building this guy to still be the character we all love, but a wrestler that we can take seriously. And I'm really excited to see where that growth goes over the course of the next 4 to 6 years.
Okay, 3 things about that. One, I did not know Orange Cassidy was a Green Ant. That's some wild information for me. But yeah, 2, I
He was
like
Green Ant or he was Red Ant? Keep going and I'll look that up.
either way. I had no idea he was even under either of those ants. But yeah, 2, I'm glad they're making the effort to actually make him feel like an actual legitimate main eventer who can go for the towel and he should actually have a chance for the win. Because the whole lazy, laid back gimmick is very, as entertaining as it is, it's a comedy gimmick. And if you get too lax in the comedy gimmick, it's easy for a wrestler to be basically bogged down in a way that you can't really see them ever going for a title. Take Santino Morella, for example. Great wrestler, great promo, but got bogged down by the comedy. This way, you at least build Orange Cassidy up to prove that he's more than a comedy guy. Like when you see his promos with Jericho or the matches, like the match he had with Neville, for example, you can tell he's an actual legitimate great wrestler with potential for a title run in his future. And if you show more of his not necessarily serious side, but more I guess legitimate. I feel like I've been saying that a lot, but legitimate side, then people can actually believe that he's actually got a chance to win the title one day. And three, I don't remember what my three was, so we're gonna forget I said three. I might edit that out. I might keep that in, but two things right there. There was just two things.
Absolutely. So I did a little bit of digging. He was Fire Ant in the colony in Chikara, a one-time Cumpleaños champion and two-time winner of the King of Trios tournament. So R.I.P. Chikara, but you needed to die the death you died when you died with everything that came out. But yeah, so it just goes to show what an incredible worker he is, that his style is so different from this character that easily made him more money and more famous than his early adaptation of Orange Cassidy ever did, and he can still pull out these crazy moves without it being very obvious of, oh hey, I know that guy, I've seen that move before. It speaks wonders to his understanding of ring psychology and how he's able to carry himself in a ring, that you can see Orange Cassidy and Fire Ant as two completely different people. Cody Rhodes came back out after the match with Orange Cassidy. So Cassidy is laid out in the center of the ring. He's done. He's out. There's this weird, like, almost Ocarina of Time kind of music, like soft, like piano-y style thing. Everyone's kind of looking around. No one really knows what's going on. And then you hear that voice that goes, there is more than one, or wrestling has more than one royal family. And then Cody Rhodes pops up. His hair is jet black. He's not got the brown hair anymore. He's not got the bleach blonde hair. Jet black, emo, like Spider-Man 3 Cody Rhodes.
Is he
Except
back to being? Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, is he back to being Spider-Man 3 Cody Rhodes because he's trying to be serious, or is he filming another movie?
Well, the whole we're filming something new thing came last week when we were promised a return, and then he announced that they were doing that game show. So he's back, yay. Uh, it's interesting. It seems like all of the elite are kind of making this shift to, if not being heel characters, at least shifting their character from the Ring of Honor, New Japan kind of guys that we all fell in love with, except for Hangman Page. Hangman Page is still, your depressed millennial cowboy who drinks too much and doesn't swear enough. But everyone else is kind of shifting their ways, which I think is interesting. It's a good way to show that, like, they don't take themselves too seriously and are willing to do something different and something new. He doesn't really give any kind of promo. He comes down to the ring. Brody Lee immediately vacates the ring and dips out. He's trying to goad Brody back into the ring, and then all of the Dark Order, like 30 something guys, end up on the apron and kind of escort Brody out, and that's the end of that. It was a cool spot. I think there could have been a more impactful way to bring Cody back. I think you could have done it without the entrance like setup at all. Have him holding a camera, off to the side of the ring, and then just like brain Brody Lee in the head or something. Do something, I think, a little more exciting to make you go, wait, what just happened? And then realize it's Cody. I think the whole entrance, but my hair's different, guys. Aren't I so cool? Was a little one note and a little lackluster, at least in my opinion.
I'd agree with that. If nothing else, I'll say that it's a decent start to something, to some kind of character development. I think, like, I still think the black hair is just an out for this game show he's doing, but if he can find a way to just compact it in both ways, I'm filming the game show and I'm going to freshen up my character. This is a good start, I think. Just have him come out, give some cold stares, and then in the coming weeks, those stares escalate a little bit to suddenly he's cleaning house and he's cleaning out the whole Dark Order. Then he's making more physical, definitive statements of "I want my title back." Then just escalate that until we get an actual title match. Whenever the next title match or pay per view is, it's a nice start. And I do like the idea that each person in the elite is kind of, what's the word? evolving. They're
Mhm.
evolving their characters a little bit because they could easily just bounce off the characters they established in New Japan and be in the Elite and Ring of Honor because all of their indie fans are going to love it. But how much is that going to stretch wide for these mainstream TV audiences? So you've got to freshen things up every once in a while to to bring in the average viewer. I'll say that bring in the casual viewer.
Absolutely. And I've got 2 points on what you said. So as far as the black hair goes, I would agree with you if he wasn't already like a known commodity as Cody Runnels as an actor on TV through the Arrowverse shows with his natural brown hair. I think the black hair is a much more my gimmick is shifting, even if I'm still, the great American boy, like, I'm gonna come down and give you a promo and talk to the fans after the matches kind of thing. My hair's shifting, my demeanor's shifting, my personality is slowly moving closer and closer to being that heel guy. I think it's an interesting case of long-term storytelling with Cody, and he's always been a big fan, and his whole family have always been a big fan of telling the story of a transition through physical appearance before you do any kind of like getting on the mic and saying I hate you guys and da 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 da. Dusty's whole premise was show don't tell. You're on my television screen for a period of time. I don't need you talking to me. I need you to show me why I should care about what you're doing and who you are. And I think Cody is doing his best to take that advice to heart and show that his hair is darkening like his soul might be before he comes out and just starts laying out people that he cares about and his friends.
I think that's fair. Like on paper, it sounds really cheesy, but in execution, if even outside wrestling, just movies, TV shows, it's a classic way to show characters evolving, changing. It's as long as you don't do the actual Spider-Man thing where Cody's just doing the Macarena in the street, then this could be really cool.
Yeah. But that's also the beautiful thing about pro wrestling is it sounds cheesy on paper, but if you've got a guy that believes in what he's putting out there, it's going to be incredible.
It's classic
Like,
storytelling.
exactly. Mankind taking off his mask and changing his shirt and becoming Cactus Jack and terrifying Shawn Michaels and Triple H sounds cheesy as hell and is cheesy as hell. But Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and Mankind made that work and made it one of like the most talked about segments of that era of Raw. And cheesy is not always a bad thing, in my opinion. So the main event of this week was previously announced to be a six-man tag between Jon Moxley, Will Hobbs, who is a new signing and has been on Dark for the last couple of weeks, and oh goodness gracious, skateboard guy paints his face.
Sting, Tony
No,
Hawk,
different.
Darth Maul,
No,
um,
closer to
uh,
Darth Maul and Sting, but not quite. Oh Lord, what is his name?
Bam Margera,
You're not helping.
Darby Allin.
Yeah, Darby Allin. I hate you so much. Yes. So it was supposed to be Will Hobbs, Darby Allin, and Jon Moxley facing off against Brian Cage, uh, Lance Archer, and Ricky Starks. Lance Archer was announced before the show started that he had been exposed to COVID-19 and wouldn't be appearing on the card. And about 15 other wrestlers didn't end up appearing on the card, including uh, Darby Allin, both of the Young Bucks, Brian Cage, basically everybody that was in the main event except for Jon Moxley and Will Hobbs. So, as is the nature of wrestling and live television, we had to have a different main event, which is where it gets exciting. Because our main event was Eddie Kingston facing off against Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship, which was crazy. It was a cool match, man. It was really, really good. And it was a really good way to kind of explain to people that don't know Eddie Kingston from his time in Impact or don't watch the NWA and do all this kind of stuff that this guy's not just good on the mic. And yeah, he's a bit of a bigger dude. He might look a little schlub, but homeboy can wrestle. Like this dude can go all out and can do it with style and grace and a speed that you don't expect. He is kind of the original Jeff Cobb or Willie Mack, or even going over to the WWE side of things with Keith Lee, the guy that is big and strong and buff and can lift you over his head, but he can also do a tope suicida and tope con hello and do all this crazy lucha stuff that you shouldn't expect a guy who's 260, 270, 280 to be able to do. It was a really solid match. It was shorter. It was only like 10, 15 minutes. There was a bit of an interference going on where Kingston is like trying to get one up on Moxley after Moxley defends the title and tries to attack him from behind. Will Hobbs, again, recent signing, comes down and protects him, kind of breaks all of that up. And it was good. It showed that Will and John's like relationship and their kind of mentorship going through was going to continue on. And it continued to establish Will Hobbs as a future main eventer. He's a guy that I'm really excited to see work in ring on AEW, like Dynamite proper, or on pay-per-view. I've only seen him in maybe one or two dark matches. Dark isn't something that I really go and seek out unless my timeline just explodes with how incredible it was, because it seems like sort of a waste of time, as politely as I can say that. It's just a lot of guys that are getting their, how do I put this? It's kind of like watching FCW tapes from 2006 is watching some of Dark, where you've got guys that are young and unknown on the indies coming in to do tryout matches on house shows that there was a camera there, so why don't we film it and throw it up on YouTube so we have, an extra hour to 2 hours of content. So I usually skip out on it, but I've seen him work once or twice, and he's really, really good. He's one of the guys that I was really hoping they were going to bring in once the pandemic kind of subsided and they were able to go back to a full touring schedule. I'm glad that he's got himself a contract and he's doing his thing.
Okay. 3 things. Which way I count, this might end up being 7, 8 things, or maybe just 2 things again, but
Fair enough.
thing number 1, I'm not familiar with Will Hobbs. I've never heard the name before, but I'll take your word for it that he's really good. I do like that they're establishing him by aligning him with Jon Moxley, the World Heavyweight Champion, establishing that relationship and introducing the viewers that way. Is basically like giving him a cosign, like, hey, you don't know who this guy is, but he's cool with your favorite World Heavyweight Champion. So if you like a champion, you may like Will Hobbs. That's a good way to introduce him, I think. 2, really big shame about all these wrestlers contacting COVID-19. I hope they recover.
And I do want to be clear, we don't have any confirmation that any of them have contracted or tested positive. All we know is that Lance Archer was exposed and the other wrestlers were not present on the card. The only person that we were told wasn't going to be present because of COVID was Lance Archer. We don't know anything else about anyone else. I don't want to put that out and start any kind of rumors. They were just absent from the card, and it's kind of assumed that they all were exposed as well because, Lance was exposed and taken off, but we don't know that for sure at this time.
Okay, that's a little less alarming. Well, it's still alarming because it's still COVID-19, but I was thinking like 15 people had tested positive. With Lance Archer, I hope he recovers, and anybody else who may or may not have been in contact with him, hopefully they have no symptoms, they don't have it, or they're at least recovering. However it goes, I just hope everybody's okay. 3, I'm glad that AEW was able to at least improv in like a way that can get people excited. It definitely made me excited when you said Eddie Kingston's wrestling for the World Heavyweight Championship, because like you said, that is such a great wrestler. If I had to do like a list of the best promos in wrestling today, maybe ever, just the top 5, Eddie Kingston's definitely going on that list. And I think he's so good at promos. People take for granted how good he is in the ring. And with him and Moxley both coming from deathmatch backgrounds, even if it's just a regular wrestling match, I'm sure that was a very good match. I'm glad Eddie Kingston's getting that shine to shine the main event because he's super talented and deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done a little bit of digging on Will Hobbs. He was a primarily San Francisco and Bay Area wrestler. He has about 10 years of experience before coming in to All Elite Wrestling. He's held titles in All Pro Wrestling, West Coast Wrestling, and places around there. He's had matches with CZW's Dojo Wars. He's a big or he was a big like Southern California indie guy. I don't see that he really did much work or any work really with PWG, but it's not hard to imagine that those guys all down there, knew of this guy just kind of crisscrossing his way up the West Coast and making really, really impressive matches and really, really good impressions on everybody, which is why he kind of got brought in as quickly as he did and hasn't been on Dark that long before being given the contract.
Okay, nice. Shout out to him. Congratulations on getting the contract.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you watch any wrestling from this week, I recommend you go back and see Will Hobbs versus Jeff Cobb from Garage Wars, like 2009, 2010. It's like right around the time that Jeff Cobb and Will Hobbs both got in the business. They're both jacked. They're huge and they just destroy one another. And it's a really fun like 15 minutes on YouTube. So that was pretty much all from AEW. The only thing I wanted to bring up, because it continually bugs me, is this week we had 3 hours of AEW television on TNT, not even counting like what was going down on the YouTube channel, and we had 2 women's matches. We had the Brandy Anna Jay, and then we had a really weird tag match with Thunder Rosa and Hikaru Shida facing off against Ty Conti and her tag partner, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head.
Was it weird in that it was just weird or weird like the Evil East match you were telling me about last week?
So, yes and no. It didn't immediately become a shoot fight the way the Evil East match happened last week, but you could tell that Thunder Rosa, when the match ended, was pissed off and was mad that something hadn't gone properly, and that there were some communication errors, and that might come down to the 4 ladies that were in the match being each of them kind of doing their own thing. And then you've got like Hikaru Shida, whose first language is Japanese, uh, you know, Thunder Rosa, who speaks English and Spanish, Ty Conti, who speaks Portuguese and Spanish and English. So it might have just been a simple matter of like not understanding the match as it was being called in the ring. It looked weird and disjointed. It wasn't the worst women's match that we've seen from AEW by any case, but it's also not one that I'm ever gonna like go back and seek out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I kind of feel for Thunder Rosa a little bit for it to just have this bad luck of miscommunication and back-to-back matches. So hopefully it
Yeah,
gets better
it
from there.
was. Yeah, and it looks like they're all pretty like, and by they're all, AEW as a whole and the backstage area understands that like Thunder Rosa is not to blame for the way her matches on AEW or even the pay-per-views have gone recently, because she's been appearing a lot. Every time she pops up and every time she's kind of mentioned on AEW, it ends up being one of the top 5 moments of the week on their YouTube channel in the recap. Like, they love her over there. It seems like she's got to find that person that she just meshes with, and they can, kind of, how do I put this? She needs that person that she can mesh with well and have that chemistry to get out of her own head. Because aside from working for like 2 seasons on uh, Lucha Underground and then the brief like 16-week recording schedule of NWA, Thunder Rosa, to my knowledge, has never done live studio wrestling, especially not live arena wrestling in front of a crowd and in front of TV cameras. So, and that's the case with a lot of the girls in their division. Like, there's a lot of experience there. Absolutely. There's not a lot of TV experience, unfortunately. So hopefully it's just a matter of them continuing to give the ladies the opportunity to learn and to grow and to improve in their craft. And we'll eventually look back at this like year and a half of less than ideal booking on the women's division's behalf as, a dark time, but one that we outgrew very quickly.
Yeah, that might be what it has to boil down to, just lack of TV time, but like I don't know, yeah, just lack of TV time. And with lack of TV time, like the only way you're going to get around that is just more TV time, which you run the risk of having more situations like this. But it's gonna get it's gotta get worse before it gets better, you know. That's like phrase of the year basically. So the more TV matches she has, the less situations she's likely run in with this. And when it comes to just chemistry with someone, I agree with you, she definitely needs at least a person who can she can lock up with and just magic instantly. She's got a tough road so far, I think, but it's not impossible. Like even with lack of experience, she had some great matches down in NWA. I don't remember much of her Lucha Underground work, but I'm sure she had some good matches there.
You wouldn't. She was under a mask her entire time in Lucha Underground. So unless you knew that it was her under the mask, like I am probably the biggest Lucha Underground fan I know, among wrestling fans who are also into like horror and like Chicano kind of like art style music and television kind of stuff like that. And I had no idea that that was her under the mask, but I also had no idea that like Isaiah Swerve Scott was under a mask in Lucha Underground. Jeff Cobb was under a mask in Lucha Underground. I didn't find out until a couple of years ago that Prince Puma from season 1 of Lucha Underground was Ricochet. Like they had all these incredible guys and girls in that company that they could have done such incredible things. And I'm gonna vent about Lucha Underground for a minute because I love that show, and they kept getting in their own way, and it was so sad. I was so upset when that ended.
Yeah, same here. It's very much like a more extreme extent of what went down with Impact on and off. Like Impact always had I was gonna say they always had stellar TV. They didn't. That let's be honest, a lot of their on-screen stuff was rough, but
Yeah.
more often than not,
Impact's
they
been really
had.
good for the last like 2 years, but then for
Oh
like the
yeah,
the first like 5 or 6 before that, it was a bit rough. It was a
oh
bit
yeah,
rough.
definitely. Like more recently, it's been great stuff from what I've been told. Even from when I used to watch it, had some great stuff last year. But like I'm thinking like circa '06, '07 when they had AJ Styles in a turkey suit being a Cuck to Kurt Angle and Karen
Yeah.
Angle. Like they had some weird TV, but they always had great matches. You couldn't
Hmm.
deny that. They had great matches, but for whatever reason, they always had some issue with contracts or TV executives, a bunch of stuff backstage. Lucha Underground was just as much of a victim in that regard, but it got so bad that they couldn't even keep the show on TV anymore. And I really feel I it's hard for me to say that I feel for them when they ultimately were the cause of it. It was
You
like,
feel for the wrestlers. I feel zero
yes.
pity for the people at the El Rey Network that did what they did to the wrestlers with their contracts and the way that they handled those contracts. I have no sympathy for the people who did that. You deserved to lose every cent of money that you did, but you feel for the wrestlers that came to Lucha Underground, in a couple of cases came from across the globe to Lucha Underground, because people seem to forget Lucha Underground is the first place that we saw Io Shirai, Maya Iwatani, and Hikaru Shida in the
Hmm.
US, because they were part of the Black Lotus triad and had the best match in Lucha Underground history in a 3-on-1 match with Pentagon Jr., which was insane. Like they gave the entire episode to that match. It was amazing. But you had this company that seemed like they were doing really progressive, really forward thinking things, bringing in these indie stars from across the globe and not just subjecting themselves to being a US based company. And then they let the TV production people get in the way of the wrestling production people, and it all kind of got jumbled. And they tried to do the whole seasonal thing where you had a 30 episode season and then you took like almost a year off. It didn't work.
Yeah, it's always that's really what it boils down to. You just got to feel for the wrestlers because I'm always going to be a proponent to spread out wrestlers in as many places as you can. Like I'm glad that you got places like AEW, Impact Wrestling, NWA, Ring of Honor, where WWE isn't the main goalpost, where if you can't get there, you're basically done in wrestling. You've got so many options. And I like seeing Lucha Underground as one of those options. If you don't want to go to WWE, Impact Wrestling, you've got Lucha Underground as an option. And to see that option basically fall in the dirt when it had so much potential to be
Hmm.
something that lasts for so many years, something so great. It was something great, but sadly it could not last as many years. It's hard not to at least have sympathy for the wrestlers. I don't even know how to put it. It's just disappointing, is what I'm going to
Yeah.
say.
Absolutely. And before we get too far away from it, I do want to go back and correct. It was Thunder Rosa and Hikaru Shida versus Ivelisse and Diamante, not Tai Conti. So that could be where the frustration and like the rust comes from. Is Thunder Rosa and Ivelisse still kind of butting heads? I don't want to speculate too much, but that could be where it's from.
Right.
I don't know for sure. So that was all for AEW. A really good 3 hours. Again, still frustrating that we didn't get more than two women's matches totaling in like 16 minutes across 3 hours of TV. But we had more women's matches on this 3 hour span of TV than we did last week's 2 hour span of TV. So we're moving up in the world. It's all good. So jumping over across the pond, we have New Japan Pro Wrestling, who are running their G1 Climax right now. They're doing a show basically every night. I'm not going to sit here and break down every show because they're 3 hours apiece, and we already run way too long just getting through everybody. There are currently eight wrestlers that have clean sheets through 4 days of events, and some of them are expected. A couple of them are real weird, and I'm excited to see where they go. So the the eight wrestlers who have yet to drop a match in the G1 so far are Switchblade Jay White, leader of the Bullet Club. You don't expect him to lose. He had a really strong run last year, ended up losing in the semifinal, and having that happen. You have Jeff Cobb, who has had a weird relationship with the G1. He came in 2 years ago and didn't really do anything. I think had like 2 wins over the course of 30 days. Last year he had 3 or 4 wins. So far this year he's got 2 wins, so he's almost already matched up with what he did last year. Hopefully he keeps that momentum. You have Will Ospreay competing in his not G1 debut because he was in the G1 last year, but his first G1 as a full-time heavyweight. So he's no longer competing in the juniors division, no longer chasing after that, just full-time heavyweight, and he's running through people right now. You've got Taichi, who hasn't lost anything yet. You also have Tetsuya Naito, former and first ever IWGP and IWGP heavyweight and IWGP Intercontinental dual champion. Here's where it gets interesting. Toru Yano hasn't lost a match yet. Toru Yano, the ambassador of, I think it's Hokkaido Prefecture, where he's like the tourism ambassador there, and he sells people DVDs of Chaos's best matches on the way to the ring. Like a comedy wrestler, has not lost a match in the G1 this year, and has actually not had to resort to like weird underhand stuff to really hold his own in the G1 this year either. Like he's just sort of going out there and wrestling. Like he still does the turnbuckle spot where he rips off the pad and he throws them into the turnbuckle, but at that point, like that's what you expect Toru Yano to do. But he's not doing the hey, look over there and then pulling him into the schoolboy kind of stuff, anything like that. And then the other one that is surprising simply because he isn't one that I ever think of being taken seriously by a promotion as prestigious as New Japan is Juice Robinson. He has had a really good show in the B block of the G1, and it looks like he might drop his first match tomorrow night. No, Sunday night. is when the G1 comes back. He might drop his first match that night, but so far he's had a really good show. He's much more serious. He, before the pandemic, cut off the dreads and went like real serious juice with it. So it's really interesting. The G1 is always one of my favorite events of the year, simply because you never know where New Japan's going to go with their booking and what they're going to do, because you have people in the tournament like Tetsuya Naito, Kota Ibushi, like Takahashi. You've got Kazuchika Okada, who's lost a match. So there's no telling who's going to have a really strong G1. And the guys that do have really strong G1s could turn this into a main fixture run, maybe not at New Japan, but somewhere else, because you've got Lance Archer, who's running through everyone in AEW right now, that was not looking like he was going to do anything in any kind of major American promotion until he put together an insane run in the G1 last year. So what do you think about the G1? What's your history with it? Have you watched much of it in the past? Like, where do you go with New Japan wrestling so far as your
I,
like watch habits?
I think G1 Climax, that's always been something where if I don't watch any other pay-per-view from New Japan, well, I'd be sure to watch Wrestle Kingdom, but if I didn't watch anything else from New Japan, I would go out of my way to watch G1 Climax. G1 Climax is very much like, how can I explain this for, I guess, American listeners who may not be familiar with New Japan? It's kind of like if you,
It's
like
the
how in the
NBA
world,
finals of wrestling.
ooh, that's a really good one. I was going to try to like tie into the Royal Rumble, but that's kind of the perfect analogy. It's the NBA playoffs basically. Even if you're not a fan of the sport, basically, this is like a must-see event because there's so much like shock and excitement to it. Like you said, there's a lot of people who you may not expect to be like a big focal point of the tournament. You may even see them in the tournament and think, "Oh, why are they there? They're not gonna make a big impact." Then all of a sudden, before you know it, they're undefeated and they're like suddenly the front runner to win the whole thing. Like you said, Toru Yano and Juice Robinson. Which Toru Yano is funny because I just like 20 minutes ago said that comedy wrestlers get bogged down by by their comedy and they don't get in the main event. Toru Yano might prove me wrong. And Juice Robinson is someone who he's been kind of had like an upward climb the last couple of years. Like I think his first G1 was like 2 years ago, and in that one it was all about him getting these upset wins and just freaking out about it. Then the year following, he's gained consistent wins and he's freaking out less because he's become not so much a serious character, but a more legitimate character. We're gonna call the episode legitimate because that's apparently the only episode, the only name, the only word that I keep saying. Apparently, I don't know words anymore. But yeah, like Juice Robinson's evolution has been fun to see, and seeing him as like a front runner is super cool. And you also get like people you expect to do really well, like what's the name, Nato and Okada, and then they just show out proud these amazing matches. Some of Kenny Omega's best matches before he went to AEW were all in the G1 Climax. So it's always consistent quality, and the outcomes always surprise you. So I'll say if you've never seen New Japan, don't start with a pay-per-view, don't start with a match. Start with the G1 Climax. You're not going to be disappointed. It might make you a diehard fan right after that. It's always great stuff every year.
Absolutely, and especially with the way they're doing it this year, due to the pandemic and everything going on, I just completely wiped out my desk to the right of the computer. Oh Lord, that's gonna be fun to clean up. But again, continuing on, especially with the way they're doing the G1 Climax this year, because of the pandemic and because of time constraints and their scheduling, there's no tag matches for the block that's on a rest day for that show. So the only wrestling you're seeing on a G1 Climax show this year are G1 Climax matches, because they're obviously not able to fly to the new places. So as soon as the A block is done, they're getting put on buses and driven to the next A block location. As soon as B block is done, they're getting put on buses and driven to the next B block location. So you're just having these like 2.5 hour concise shows, which I get sounds ridiculous, 2.5 hours as a concise show, but it really is, of just hard hitting, fast-paced like action from start to finish. By the time you start to settle back in your seat and relax, the show's over and you're on with your day.
Honestly, I think that without tag matches, that might be a low barrier because I don't know about you, but I always used to like kind of fast forward through tag matches just because I wasn't super interested in seeing them. By just having the G1 matches and you just get straight to the meat and potatoes. Because even going back to your NBA playoffs analogy, I want to go, if we get to the finals, I just want to see who's playing in the finals. I don't want to see the Utah Jazz and the Raptors come back in the bubble for a scrimmage. Like I'm gonna
Exactly.
skip this game. Like just give me what I want.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting to see if they continue on, as they continue on, rather, if when people start dropping out of contention for like, hey, you've been mathematically eliminated, because they had to stick around for those tag matches even after being mathematically eliminated. It'll be really interesting to see if maybe the G1 Climax final for this year is like a 40-minute video that they just upload and they're like, hey, here's the final match. It was one match. Here you go. We're not doing all this extra crap. I think it's a really interesting way to kind of keep it fresh and keep it interesting. And it really takes away from the fatigue that a lot of people feel by the end of the month, because it's 30 days of basically straight 3 to 4 hour shows on a typical year. But if you feel so much more rested knowing that you really only have 90 minutes to 2 hours of wrestling to watch, and you have 2 to 3 days between each show. So keeping back over on that side of the pond, we do really quickly just want to recap NXT UK. They've been back for about 2 weeks now. They announced a Heritage Cup, which is going to be a traditional World of Sport British Rounds Wrestling Match Cup, where 8 wrestlers are going to face off. I don't know that there's a NXT UK title match associated with like the winner of the cup. If there is, I must have missed that. But so you've got Alexander Wolf facing off against Noam Dar, Flash Morgan Webster facing off against A-Kid, a wildcard entrant to be announced at the time of entrance facing off against Trent Seven, which some people think is going to be Tyler Bate coming back from an injury, or Pete Dunne returning because he hasn't wrestled since before the pandemic. And then you also have Joseph Connors facing off against Dave Mastiff. So for people that aren't familiar with World of Sport kind of British wrestling, it's 6 rounds. It's very similar to a boxing match. So it's 6 rounds of 2 minutes apiece. There's no rest holds, and submissions are only allowed, I believe, after the 3rd round. And it's a 30-second rest period between each round. So if you count, like if you have him in a pinfall and you're at like 2 and the period's over, he gets up, he walks over to his corner, he rests, he can come back in and start round 3. It's almost a mix of like boxing and the UFC rules, but done with wrestling. And it's really interesting because the reason that kind of started in British rounds wrestling got its start is because back during like the World War II era, 40s, 50s, 60s, all British wrestling was done in a boxing ring. So you couldn't do the high flying, springing off the ropes kind of stuff that was popularized in the US, because those ropes are stiff. They're not meant to spring off of. They're meant to hold you in the ring. That canvas is hard. It's meant to just be there to it's not meant to, break your fall or anything like that. It's just there. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see British rounds wrestling kind of brought into this modern era and see how they do the British rounds wrestling that made guys like Johnny Saint and William Regal famous on World of Sport, while keeping the high flying and high intensity kind of pace and style that we come to expect from British wrestling today.
Okay, that actually sounds really. I didn't even know NXT UK was back, but the fact they're doing this tournament is really interesting. I saw one British rounds match like year and a half ago, and I always thought it was a super interesting concept. I don't know how that concept can really work for a tournament, because it's a very interesting concept for a match, but I feel like you might get a little, I guess, fatigued, or the concept might get old if you're seeing a string of these matches across one tournament. I could be proven wrong, but it's an interesting thing at least to And it's a good way to fill time when you can't have a whole lot of matches in this pandemic time, I think.
Absolutely. And it's a fantastic way to take these guys that were kind of a lot of these guys who were sort of B players in the old world of NXT UK and kind of falling back to guys that are no longer around for good reason that we're not going to get into. We'll never mention them on the show. They're done. The only way to keep that kind of crap out of wrestling is to just acknowledge that it happened and then never bring up their names again. It's a good way to establish these new stars and these new people, including a young man named Saxton Huxley, who I saw work very briefly before the pandemic and before NXT UK was kind of taken off the air. He's got a very Bruiser Brody kind of look to him. He's big. He's got a bit of a beer belly. He doesn't look like he'd be like that strong, but he's got crazy eyes and he looks like he's mean and he's gonna just like get in there and just beat you down. He and the NXT UK champion Walter had an insane match. Like I've never seen Walter look like he was worried he was gonna lose his title until this match with just some guy that is immediately propelled to the main event status with Saxton Huxley. So, in his time with Pete Dunne, in his matches with Tyler Bate, in his matches with Noam Dar, all these guys that have, and people we don't talk about, all these guys, he comes in and there are moments where he gets the upper hand, or they get the upper hand, but he always looks like he's in control. This is the first time that I've seen someone get in the ring with him and tell him, we're going to go at my pace. We're going to work at my pace. We're going to work the match I want to work, and we'll see if you survive. So I'm really excited to see how Saxton Huxley's career and his character progress over the course of the year, and if he kind of makes that jump from NXT UK to NXT.
Same here, just because thinking of Walter with his back against the wall, with knowing his type of stature and that kind of booking, that makes me. I've never seen what Saxon Huxley even looks like, but it makes me envision him immediately as just a big time player. And if they can keep up that type of booking for him, he'd be a really special guy, even outside of NXT UK, if he ever does branch off into their American brands.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where in the first moments of that match, like, oh, they're gonna do something cool with this guy. Okay, and you just kind of have to strap in and see where it goes. So that is it for NXT UK. We also had a NXT UK women's title defense. It was an okay match. It was Kaylee Ray, the current champion, facing off against Piper Niven. They have a long history on the UK Indies. If you've seen Kaylee Ray and Piper Niven wrestle once, you've seen them wrestle 1,000 times. It's they're pretty formulaic between those two, and that's just comes from the fact that they've wrestled each other probably 150 times, both being Scottish wrestlers that kind of traveled the scene together. So, it was a good match, but it's nothing that we really need to get too far into here. So jumping over to Ring of Honor, we've got the continuation of the Pure Tournament. We had David Finlay defeating Rocky Romero, which I thought was pretty surprising. I expected Romero to go at least sort of far in the tournament and, at least bring some big name recognition. Finlay is popular amongst Ring of Honor fans. He's not super well known outside of that kind of niche circle. We also had Matt Sydal defeating Delirious, who is another kind of newer guy with the Ring of Honor kind of setup. And then next week's matches, we have Fred Yehai versus Silas Young and Josh Woods versus Kenny King. So Fred Yehai getting his Ring of Honor debut. I'm really excited about this. Yehai is probably one of my favorite indie wrestlers of the last year and a half. He's just crazy talented. And then I'm always a fan of watching Kenny King get his ass beat. So this is going to be a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, Freddie Yehai is one of the most unique wrestlers I've ever seen. He's got a certain style for him. I feel like he's given a name to, but I forget it. But he's a unique type of technical in that rather than just work a body part, work an arm, work a leg. He'll work your toes. He'll work your
Hmm.
fingers. He might bite your foot, and like it's really I never seen a wrestler work that way, and it's gave way to some really entertaining matches. So
Yeah.
like best of luck to him in his Ring of Honor career.
So that is it for the week recap. Real quick, we're going to go through my indie watch list. My recommendation this week is the ECWA Super 8 Tournament 24 on IWTV.com. So ECWA is East Coast Wrestling Association. They're one of the oldest running indies in the United States. They've been around since like 93, 94, and they've been running their Super 8 tournament since like 96. This is the 8 best independent wrestlers in the country competing in a round robin tournament to determine who the best of the best is for that year. And it's on IWTV in full right now. It's a really good show. It clocks in at like 2 hours and 40 minutes. Really, really stellar night of wrestling.
All right, cool. And speaking of stellar wrestling, that brings me to my segment of is now a good time to get back into wrestling? And I say speaking of stellar wrestling because there was not a lot of stellar wrestling.
No.
Though I will give credit to AEW. They if only for the Eddie Kingston thing, maybe I'm biased to just hearing all the info about Eddie Kingston, but that sounds legitimately great, and it sounds like that episode was at least great, and this whole endeavor they're doing with playing around with the whole 1 hour after the playoffs, I think that's smart. So kudos to them. They did some good stuff this week. WWE just sounds like it's in shambles. Oh my god.
Yeah, WWE was rough. We didn't even get into what went on 205 Live or main event
Mm,
because who cares? But
mm.
it was a week of weird, disjointed booking that just didn't work for me, and I hope they figure it out because I legitimately think that the wrestling world is better when WWE is at the top of their game, and they haven't been for the last almost 2 years now. But yeah, hopefully they figure it out. Hopefully they get better, and hopefully we have some more fun talking about them in the future.
Hopefully. So like before we go, I do want to say like support like independent wrestling creators out there, be it wrestlers and just fans doing their own thing. Like we opened the show, you mentioned Tiger Driver, which is funny because like my Tiger Driver shirt or my Chris J. Wilson shirt from his Till the End company that actually came in the mail today. I was gonna wear it on the show, but my light and my camera wasn't agreeing with me, so I got his Black Lives Matter
I
T-shirt,
dig
and
that. That's
yeah,
dope.
I was gonna just shout that out because not only is it just a dope front and a dope back, but the all of the proceeds go to like Black Lives Matter organizations, Trans Black Lives organizations, Black sex worker collectives, like really good cause. This is not an ad, by the way. This is just really cool happenstance coincidence. I just thought
I mean, if they
I
want
might
to
as well.
sponsor us, that'd be dope.
Hey, Tiger Driver, if you're listening, that's the go ahead right there. But yeah, just really dope shirt. I just wanted to shout out stuff. At Christian with a TIE, and if you're watching on video, I'll add a link at the bottom somewhere. But really dope shirt. He's doing really cool stuff over there, and I encourage you to put your money in places where the creators, especially fans of wrestling who are doing dope stuff like this, are getting your money's worth.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter at Gladen, Sam. You want to spell out that comma, so it's Gladen, COMMA, Sam. And read my coverage of all things pro wrestling at dailyddt.com.
And if you like disappointment, you can read my bad tweets at RamBamsJam on Twitter. Um, I was gonna say my bad pictures on Instagram for my photography stuff, but it's COVID's going around. I'm not really doing any shooting at the moment. So if you want to see me promote all these podcasts on my Instagram, you can. That's also WhamBamsJam. There's a Patreon that I haven't had a chance to post content to, but I'm working on it. I think that's everything I got to promote.
Your other podcast, plug that.
Oh yeah, I have another podcast. That's
You do
right.
have another podcast.
The Mental Health Check-In podcast. We're doing some good stuff over there. This week we talked to Kevin S. Wilson. You might have seen him on TikTok as the cross culture Christian. He's a pastor, chai tea enthusiast. We have really dope conversations, so check that episode out. And if you want to just share some healing, to share the episode. It sounds shameless to say share this episode, but like I just want to say share it, just to share it to people who need it. It's what I'm trying to say. People who need the healing. Share it to people who need to heal.
Absolutely. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a rating and review. It really seriously does help us out. You can follow the show on Twitter at LapsedGraps. That's LAPSEDGRAPS. And until next time,
We out.